One day, in the summer of 1937, the young American composer John Cage was working in Hollywood on an experimental film with the German director Oskar Fischinger when he heard something that changed his thinking and the direction of avant-garde music. You might have seen some of Fischinger's work in Fritz Lang's 1929 silent film Woman in the Moon. He built the rockets and starry sky and planet surfaces for the set. Then, in 1936, with Nazi power on the rise and abstract art falling out of favor, Fischinger had grabbed a lifeline from Germany to Hollywood. Although he would work on the opening to the 1940 Walt Disney film Fantasia, choreographed around music by Johann Sebastian Bach, he ran into the brick wall of conventional thinking in Hollywood and quit to take up his oil paints. But in 1937, he still had dreams. So there was the accomplished director, Fischinger, at age 37, and his unknown assistant, Cage, just 25. Cage picked up a long pole with a chicken feather attached to the tip and moved scraps of colored cardboard along wires in the animation studio while Fischinger photographed them. Cage said, "In the end, it was a beautiful film in which these squares, triangles, and circles and other things moved and changed color." But the lasting image is what Fischinger said as Cage pushed the scraps of paper on the wires. He said, "Everything in the world has its own spirit, and this spirit becomes audible by setting it into vibration." Cage says, "That set me on fire. He started me on a path of exploration of the world around me, which has never stopped." The physicist Philip Morse explains, "The whole study of sound is a study of vibrations. Some part of a system has stiffness. When it is pulled away from its position of equilibrium and then released, the system oscillates." By that, Morse means vibrations create sound waves that move outward, pushing faster moving air against slower moving air. If you could watch, it would be like a weather front moving in. These collisions are the origin of what we think of as sound. John Milton Cage Jr. was born on September 5, 1912. His father was an inventor who worked on submarines, among other things. During World War I, John Sr. developed a system for detecting German U-boats in the English Channel. John Jr. was 5 years old when he attended his first symphony orchestra concert with his mother and was so excited he couldn't sit down. At age 12, Cage got on a bicycle and made the rounds of Los Angeles radio stations to propose a radio show about the Boy Scouts. One station, KNX, said yes, but the Boy Scouts, whom Cage hadn't consulted, said no. John Cage's father once told him that if someone says can't, that shows you what to do. So the boy went ahead anyway. A school friend, Kimmis Hendrick, said Cage could play the romantic compositions of Friedrich Chopin on the piano beautifully when he was only a teenager. But by the time Cage turned 30, the modernist American composer Henry Cowell said he was writing strange little piano pieces with an unusual sense of the sound interest created by odd tonal compositions. Cage studied dissonant counterpoint and composition with Cowell. Because of his improvisational nature, Cage moved in and out of work frequently, rarely staying for long. He was the model of a starving artist. But things were about to change. In March 1940, dancer and choreographer Sevilla Fort asked Cage to help her come up with some music for a performance at the Cornish Theatre in Seattle. Space was cramped, and he had little to work with except for a small grand piano. English composer David Revel, who has written a biography of Cage called The Roaring Silence, says Cage remembered the way Henry Cowell had played inside the piano, strumming, striking, or plucking the strings, muting them, and running their lengths with darning needles. So, with the performance only days away, Cage created a giant experimental string instrument. Revel writes that he tried placing objects in the piano, running through newspapers, magazines, ashtrays, books, and a pie plate. But these objects kept falling through the strings. So, Cage threaded screws and bolts and weather stripping inside the piano, transforming it into an instrument that possessed the dynamic range of the harpsichord. Rather than producing a scalar succession of pitches, different registers of the keyboard now yielded varied timbres like plinks and thuds. The American composer Lou Harrison told Cage, "Ah, damn it, I wish I'd thought of that." Later, Cage began developing time signatures from a complicated chart in the Chinese Book of Changes, or I Ching, and later yet from tarot cards, not bothering to write in pitches. In a capstone of Cage's career, the American pianist David Tudor sat down at the Maverick Concert Hall in Woodstock, New York, one evening in August 1952. He closed the lid of his piano and never played a note. Instead, he set a stopwatch to 30 seconds and waited as it counted down. Then he reset the stopwatch to 2 minutes, 23 seconds, and then to 1 minute and 40 seconds. John Cage named this composition for its duration, 4 minutes and 33 seconds. Some of Cage's antics and manic energy appear in a 1961 collection of his writings called Silence. Between the experimental typography and odd collection of anecdotes, whose only point sometimes appears to be a punchline, you could take Silence as a joke. But many serious people take the work very seriously. Bard College composer and critic Kyle Gann, who wrote an introduction to the book's 50th anniversary edition, says, "It took this book to get Cage's ideas noticed in the public world." In this course, as we think about music and about the space between notes, which some people think of as silence, and which John Cage saw as a whole new musical frontier, I'll share 3 brief stories that relate to the theme, almost the way Cage would tell them. He tells the first in silence, the second is told about him, and the third doesn't come from Cage at all. But you'll see the point, which will bring our conversation back to music. In the 1950s, Cage taught at the New School for Social Research in New York, and substituted once for his old teacher, Henry Cowell, in a course on Eastern music. Cage told Cowell, "I don't know anything about the subject." And Cowell said, "Oh, that's all right. Just go where the records are. Take one out, play it, and then discuss it with the class." Cage says, "Well, I took out the first record. It was an LP of a Buddhist service. It began with a short microtonal chant with sliding tones, then soon settled into a single, loud, reiterated percussive beat. This noise continued relentlessly for about 15 minutes with no perceptible variation. A lady got up and screamed and then yelled, 'Take it off! I can't bear it any longer!' So I took it off. A man in the class then said angrily, 'Why did you take it off?' I was just getting interested." Bucknell University philosopher Richard Fleming relates the second story in his book, Evil and Silence. Cage told him a fire alarm went off in his apartment building one night and beeped all night long, keeping everyone awake, all except one person. Cage said, "I remained in bed, listened carefully to its pattern, and worked it into my thoughts and dreams, and I slept very well." Final story, from the biography Thelonious Monk, The Life and Times of an American Original, by UCLA history professor Robin Kelly. Late in life, bipolarism and depression reduced Monk from the brilliant jazz pianist and bop innovator of the 1940s and 50s to the point where he could no longer play his own compositions and rarely left his bedroom. Kelly writes that Monk's refusal to play and his reluctance to leave his room were regarded by virtually everyone close to him as symptomatic of his mental illness. But one day, in March 1976, Monk was listening to a Columbia University radio broadcast dedicated to his music. Kelly says, a guest expert began droning on about how Monk created extraordinary music in spite of playing the wrong notes on the piano. Perturbed, Monk dialed the Columbia switchboard and left a message to tell the guy on the air, the piano ain't got no wrong notes. In this lesson, we'll return to the principle of shifting, that is, moving up and down the neck of the guitar. So let's review the basics. The shifting motion comes mainly from the shoulder. As much as you can, keep your arm fixed in a straight line from the elbow to the hand. And your left-hand thumb should move along a straight line on the neck. When you shift up the neck to a new position, check that your thumb remains opposite your first and second fingers. Again, we don't want to make the shift and then readjust our thumb once we get there. As you shift back down the neck, move the elbow out away from your torso and then slightly rotate your forearm outward to maintain proper position. Otherwise, your hand will end up sideways like that. So as you shift down, rotate outward a little bit, maintain that nice forward position. Let's play a 1-octave F major scale, all on the first string. So we start with our first finger on the first fret F, and then third finger G. Now shift up so that your first finger is on the 5th fret. That's the note A, and we're now in 5th position on the neck of the guitar. Then continue with second finger, that's a B flat, and then 4th finger, that's a C. Now shift up again so that your first finger is on the 10th fret, that's the note D, and we're in 10th position. And then third finger on the 12th fret E, and finish with 4th finger on the 13th fret F. So we ended up 1 octave above the starting note. And we descend the same way. 4, 3, 1, and then shift back down to 5th position with 4th finger on the 8th fret, and then 2, 1. Finally, shift back down to 1st position with 3rd finger on the 3rd fret G, and then finish with 1st fret F. Now, I'll play up and down the scale one more time. Then skip from the lowest to the highest note. That's a big shift before descending one more time. So the entire exercise looks like this: ascend, descend, big shift, and then descend again. Here it is. Now, we'll use a metronome to increase our speed and accuracy. Set your metronome to a slow tempo that feels comfortable. I've got mine set to quarter note equals 60. For each note of the scale, play 2 eighth notes with the right hand. You can pick, or you can alternate your fingers I and M, and it'll sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then, without changing the pulse, switch to single eighth notes like this. 3 and 4 and. Once you can do that at a slow tempo, you know the drill. Gradually increase your metronome one click at a time. As John Cage emphasized, music consists of sound, but also silences, or spaces between notes. In music notation, the silences are indicated by symbols that designate rests. We have symbols to designate rests corresponding with the duration of each type of note, including quarter, eighth, half, and whole. The whole rest is written as a filled-in rectangle that hangs from the fourth line of the staff. It looks like an upside-down hat, and it tells a performer to remain silent for 4 beats. Let's play a whole note, alternating with a whole rest on the open E string. 1, 2, 3, 4, rest, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, rest, 2, 3, 4. So when we see a rest, we want to dampen the sound of the string. And usually, this is easiest to do with the right hand. You saw how I did it there. I just used the side of my hand to mute the strings. The half rest is written as a filled-in rectangle that sits on the third line of the staff. By itself, it looks like a hat right side up. It tells a performer to remain silent for 2 beats. So try alternating a half note with a half rest on the open E string. 1, 2, 3, 4. The quarter rest is one of the hardest symbols in music notation to draw. It's a sort of squiggly vertical line that sits in the middle of the staff, and it tells a performer to remain silent for 1 beat. So let's play a quarter note, alternating with a quarter rest on the open E string. 1, 2, 3, 4. The eighth rest has the same duration as an eighth note. It's 1/2 of a beat, and its shape resembles a fancy-looking number 7. So now let's alternate an eighth note with an eighth rest on the open E string. 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. The 16th note rest has a similar shape as an 8th note rest, but with 2 curved lines, just as a 16th note has 2 flags or beams. So let's try now an exercise in 4/4 meter that contains a variety of rests. We'll stick with this open E string so that we can really focus on the rhythm. 1, 2, ready, go. The guitar capo is a device that we can attach to the neck of the instrument to shorten the vibrating length of the strings, thereby raising the pitch. The term comes from the Italian word capotasto, meaning head of the fretboard. In applying the capo to the neck of your guitar, think of it as the nut on the headstock, moving up the neck. There are different types of capos, but typically they all have a protective rubber surface that interacts with the neck and compresses the strings. A capo is useful for transposing first position melodies and chords to higher keys and for creating different timbres. The same tune played in open position will sound much different if you capo it at the 2nd, 3rd, or 5th fret. So let's say that you've learned a song that uses the G, C, and D chords. But the melody is too low for your voice, and you'd like to sing along. Attach a capo to the 2nd fret, and now everything is a whole step higher. And you didn't have to change what you were playing. We also use capos to give the guitar a different timbre, as I've indicated, and as is often the case in flamenco playing. In the same way, if we tune the G string down a half step to F sharp, and attach a capo to the 3rd fret, we can play lute music from the original tablatures. So let's try capoing our guitar at the 3rd fret and playing some open chords we already know. Once you've tuned that F sharp back to G, line the capo up close to the fret wire, but not directly on top of it. And make sure that it's straight along the fret. And play the open strings to make sure it's attached correctly. So far, we've learned movable pentatonic and major scales, beginning with the root on the 6th string. In this lesson, we're going to learn these two scales with the root on the 5th string instead. So now you'll have two ways to play each scale. Each of these scale forms requires a shift, which is why we just reviewed that technique. We'll play a C major scale. So start with your 2nd finger on the 5th string, 3rd fret. And then continue with 4th finger, 5th fret. Now on the 4th string, 1st finger, 2nd fret. 2nd finger on the 3rd fret. And 4th finger on the 5th fret. Continue on the 3rd string with 1st finger at the 2nd fret. Then 3rd finger at the 4th fret. And now, staying on the 3rd string, shift up to 5th position so that the 1st finger is at the 5th fret. Then 3rd finger at the 7th fret. Now on the 2nd string, 1st finger at the 5th fret. 2nd finger at the 6th fret. And 4th finger at the 8th fret. Finally, on the 1st string, 1st finger at the 5th fret, 3rd finger at the 7th fret, and 4th finger at the 8th fret. And you descend the same way. One time through the whole scale now. Now, let's try a C minor pentatonic, also with the root on the 5th string. So start on that 5th string with your first finger at the 3rd fret C, and then 4th finger at the 6th fret. Continue with 4th string, 1st finger at the 3rd fret. Now 3rd finger at the 5th fret. 3rd string, 1st finger, 3rd fret. Then 3rd finger at the 5th fret. 2nd string, 2nd finger, 4th fret. Then 4th finger at the 6th fret. Finally, 1st string, 1st finger at the 3rd fret. 4th finger at the 6th fret. And then to reach the high C and complete the 2-octave scale, shift the 4th finger up 2 frets to the 8th fret. And you descend the same way. Once again, the whole scale up and down. To figure out where to start our new scale patterns, we'll need to know all of the notes on the 5th string. So, here goes. Open A, 1st fret A sharp or B flat, 2nd fret B, 3rd fret C, 4th fret C sharp or D flat, 5th fret D, 6th fret D sharp or E flat, 7th fret E, 8th fret F, 9th fret F sharp or G flat, 10th fret G, 11th fret G sharp or A flat, and 12th fret A. So now, if you want to play a G major scale, you have 3 options. You can play the scale in 1st position using open strings. Or starting at the 6th string on the 3rd fret. Or starting on the 5th string at the 10th fret. Practicing and mastering these new positions and scales are important steps toward knowing the notes all over the neck. Our tune today is an homage to the Eagles I call Hotel Colorado. Begin by putting your capo on the 3rd fret. Our nice chord progression is as follows: A minor, E major, G, D, F, C, D minor, and back to E. And let's revive our Travis picking skills from Lesson 12 for a finger picking pattern over these chords. Place your 3 fingers, index, middle, and ring, on the top 3 strings, and use your thumb to change between the bass notes depending on the root of the chord. That's the 6th string for the G and E, 5th string for A minor and C, and 4th string for D, D minor, and F. If you really want to get fancy, you can alternate the root of each chord with the 5th. The melody is played almost entirely on the 1st string, so you'll need to shift frequently. let me play through the chords first. For each measure, I'll play 2 times through our basic Travis picking pattern like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. And now you'll hear the chords in the back, and I'm going to play through the melody 1 time.